I was a naive pledge at our first meeting. The pledge trainer, as a scholarship advisor, and Marty, about the same size, same age as the rest of us, got up and said, in a few words that we didn't understand, in college is different than high school. And therefore, you will sit study table 5 nights a week from 7 to 10 every night. And I said, what in the hell did I get myself into? We did sit study table, but we sit just foreign languages and proctoring study table. And you'll learn from the speakers we have this morning about all those things, and we will celebrate those things as we celebrate Marty's life. We have Milton Cox, who's probably known Marty longer than in high school. We have Elizabeth Johnson, who was a colleague of Marty's at the Wells Library, and then later at the Lilly Library at Indiana University. We have Rick Bogidian, in the late 60s. And we have Bill Butts, who was in my class in the early 60s. Over the world. Following that, we have an opportunity to individually, collectively, whatever you want, visit the Lilly, who has a volume that they have dedicated to Marty. We have an opportunity to visit what I call 1075 North Jordan, where the KDR house was located when we were in school. It's now 1075 North Jordan, 1230 to 230, and there will be representatives from the other scholars who occupy the house now, or those of us who want to join them there from 1 to 4. And another who is a fraternity brother. I don't know how long he spent putting it all together. And the flower bringing Marty's love of Indiana University, representing the orange and blue colors of KDR. Now, with no further ado, Bill, you're up.
Thank you much. I'm taking you back to high school days now, Arsenal Technical High School up in Indianapolis. And I took 2 years of Latin, and I decided in my junior year I was going to do the grade. I was going to read Virgil. I went to class, and it was tough, but there was one of my colleagues, one of my favorite students there. First time I met him, friend, and it wasn't until we went to the state contest for who's the best in Latin in the state that I realized Marty was getting first place in the state of Indiana. And suddenly I realized this guy is a scholar as well as just a wonderful, ordinary guy. So our adventures in high school include not only the Latin, but also Marty as director of the Arsenal Canon, the school newspaper and the yearbook. And because Tech High was a Civil War arsenal, the period, and the yearbook and all of the journal efforts were located in the West Residence, the General's West Residence. So Marty and Ellie Singenberger, who was in charge of the scholarship with respect to journalism, they made that place a welcoming place for students. I remember going over there to the West Residence. It's very informal, sitting down and getting to know Marty in a wonderful way. And then suddenly happened. And Tom Bollinger and Mike Seitz and myself, we realized that we had so much in common as really being academics as well as enjoying life, that we decided we would form a club, the DQYCs. And we pledged that no one would know what those letters stood for. So, Marty, rest assured that I'm not going to blow the cover at this moment. So, as a group of guys in high school, juniors and seniors, we had such a wonderful time at Marty's home. Marty invited us in, and Marty's mom was a wonderful cook, a wonderful Italian, warm person. And so once we got to know her and sampled some of that cuisine, the first thing we would do when we arrived is go check in the refrigerator. Huge upper pool table in the basement and slot machines, and so it was a real fun time for guys. And great to see a couple of brothers back there, and we enjoyed our times at your house. Then Marty, then came graduation time, and it was off to different schools. Of course, Marty to IU, where his career was formed, and it wasn't until the late '60s, after finishing our degrees and Tom being in the Marines, after all this time, we got back together again with our families. It was a wonderful time. 6 times a year, we would get together for the great basketball games. It was the time for the only tickets we could get were for the holiday tournament. So we did that and enjoyed that. Got to go see some chair throwing and some great and as we grew up and our children grew up, we were such a family that my kids and all of our kids called Marty Uncle Tom, I was Uncle Bill, and Aunt Phyllis, and so forth. It was a really close-knit family. And then we discovered Colorado, 1972, and after that, we journeyed to Colorado as a that part of life. A little bit of humor. I remember looking at Marty's career now as a cataloger. I wrote my PhD dissertation in mathematics. And I can remember Marty cataloging my PhD. And my PhD was 28 pages long. And he said, "My God, Mel, all these other dissertations are 200, 300 pages. How did you get by with the dissertation 28 pages?" Tom Connie's and Lois, they discovered their grandparents, of Connie's grandparents. It had been torn, it had been rolled up for so many years. And so Tom went to Marty and he said, "Marty, in your cataloging work, I know you do a lot of restoration. Do you know someone who could fix this up for us?" And so Marty said, "Yes, I do." And he took that, and when he returned that to Tom and Connie, that document was beautifully framed, excellent condition. So Marty was a pro and a friend in so many ways. I'll end with my favorite Latin expression for Marty. It's a wonderful relationship.
Hi, everybody. I'm Elizabeth Johnson. My years with Marty were at the Lilly Library primarily. A lot of you here today worked with Marty more in the Wells Library, but I think we share a lot of the same memories of Marty as an amazing colleague. When I look back over his, he spent almost 50 years working in the Indiana University libraries. And that's just extraordinary. He started as a student, as many of us do when we want to be librarians. We start working in a student position and then became a professional librarian there and worked his career. And I'm not sure people could do that today in quite the same way that he was able to do that, to become nationally and internationally known as a librarian who really changed the way some of us were able to do our work. When he started as a librarian, the world of libraries in the United States was undergoing a lot of change thanks to computers. It's a little bit more than I have time for today to try to explain cataloging, but there's a lot of minutia, which Marty was really brilliant with. But basically what you got is a book, which is kind of like a black box. And you're trying to put words around it that will allow people to find it. And before the 50s into the 60s, libraries really had kind of a local approach to that. People did things the way it was convenient to do. And then we had a period of cataloging rules that came in and people started to standardize things. And then we get the age of computers. And what that allowed people to do was standardize the way descriptions were done, standardize the way names were created for things, and it made finding books, other library materials, much easier. The Library of Congress, we send our tax dollars to the federal government, and one of the things that we support is the Library of Congress. The Library of Congress was really at the heart of this kind of standardization and cooperative venture. And Marty kind of got in on the ground floor as somebody who did not work in Washington, who was trained to do the kind of work that the Library of Congress did and push it out to the rest of us. And that was like a game changer in terms of libraries around the United States and around the world being able to share information. And it made for things to be done much more quickly, much more efficiently, much more accurately. All of those kinds of things that computers foster, but can also really mess up. You know, you put junk in, you get junk out. And Marty understood that at a very basic level. When he retired, a colleague of his, Lois Sewell, wrote an essay about all of Marty's accomplishments. So I'm not going to give you a biography of Marty. I'm just going to kind of give some hints as to how my professional life intersected with his. One of the things that Marty did, which was really groundbreaking as well, was he was one of the principal investigators, grant writers for these massive cataloging projects that Wells Library. And one of those was for a big microform set of materials that the Lilly Library held the originals for. And so because of that, we worked together on various details of how that project worked and what the output was and how Lilly benefited from the work that was done at the Wells Library. That was a wonderful relationship. When I first started there, I was named head of cataloging in 1980, and Marty was a little bit beyond my reach. He was like already a legend in the library, and I met him, of course, during orientation, but I didn't work with him for a few years. Marty loved books, you all know that. And Marty studied with the person who really kind of fostered urban cataloging in Bloomington for decades. His name was Josiah Quincy Bennett. And Marty had a lot of the same characteristics that Mr. Bennett had. A great facility for languages, Latin, Greek, a really wicked sense of humor. The ability to, you know, I don't know if you remember in Sesame Street, the little game that goes, which of these things belong together? Well, that is crucial to being a good cataloger. And both of those men really knew how to do that well. Marty was a scholar. He was an author and editor. And he was also a colleague who mentored young librarians in how to get through the promotion and tenure morass that Indiana University. That was extremely beneficial to have someone who was outside of the standard scholarly approaches to librarianship, like the bibliographers, the people who had more ready access with the teaching faculty. Catalogers are often behind the scenes, and people don't exactly understand what they do. And so for Marty to be able to show that, yes, you can successfully be promoted and get tenure at Indiana University, doing what you do best was really important to a lot of us. So when Marty retired, he, continuing to give service to Indiana University, talked with me and the director of the library at Lilly about volunteering his time to create records for our earliest books. These are incunables, is what we call them. They're books printed before 1501. 75% of them were printed in Latin. And so it's not usual to find people who know enough about books and the language to be able to do it well. Marty was perfect for that. And even though he was a volunteer, his work ethic was amazing. If he said he was going to be there at 9 and he was going to work till 3, that's what Marty did. He never took advantage of being a volunteer. And that was most appreciated. He understood the rigors of what it meant to have security in a rare book library. And unlike some other people, I can say, like myself, Marty's desk was immaculate. And so you don't know what kind of mess there might have been, going around in his brain about how to do this. But if you looked at his work, I say, I loved his wry sense of humor, and he did not like it. He knew cataloging and books and libraries so well that he would be absolutely shocked at some of the ideas and notions that administrators put forth as that Marty could get. His eyes would open a little bit, and he would kind of blink, and you could just hear him thinking, "Are you crazy? That's never going to work." But he didn't say it, which was really to everyone's advantage, because his expertise and you really couldn't question what he was saying because he knew it. And so if as an administrator you decided to choose a path, you did it knowing full well that Marty was probably right and that you were going to have trouble further on. Another thing about Marty that was just part of the fun of having him around was that he really did like to be a part of the group. And, even though he was at a much more senior level in life than many of the people who worked at Lilly, it just all fit in. We had a yearly holiday party, and we all benefited from Marty's amazing cooking skills. I've never had anyone yet make a Yule log that beautiful. It was a Julia Child experience. So I'm really grateful to Marty for having the energy and desire to do a difficult job that Lilly really benefited from, and truly the rest of the world, because some of the things that Lilly holds are unique. Nobody else has them. And he was able to provide access to those materials to the rest of the world. The book that was acquired in Marty's memory is just the kind of thing that he would love. It's a book that was published in 1496 of a Latin text that has to do with the rites of the Roman Catholic Church, originally published in the 13th century, and just full of all kinds of details. When you catalog a book like that, you not only need to be able to read the language it's published in, but you need to be able to read that book as a physical object. You need to be able to understand the paper, the ink, the boards, the way it's bound. And Marty loved all of those details. In this book, I hope you'll be able to see it, so many of those aspects that you can just kind of imagine Marty having it on his desk with his reference books to his side and just really getting everything correct before it got sent back to the staff. So I miss Marty. I miss his humor. I miss his amazing intelligence and just the kind man he was.
I'm Rick Cook again. I'm going to talk a little bit about Marty as a fraternity brother. And first of all, I want to assure you that Milton and Elizabeth and I did not get together ahead of time and come up with the same points. But we made the same points. And you will see it as I talk. There certainly is a lot to celebrate about Marty Joachim's life. He was not only a very intelligent guy, but also a good father, an incredible asset to his beloved Indiana University, a nice guy, a very special fraternity brother, and just a uniquely good person. Milton and Elizabeth shared something of Marty's life outside of KDR. And we have to remind ourselves that there really was a Marty or Dewey outside of the KDR house. Sure, we know that Marty went to high school and had a real job, and we're not at all surprised that Marty was a great guy to be around in high school and beyond. Nor are we surprised that Marty was an incredible resource for the Guiding Library, and how like him to donate so many hours to the Lowly Library. But still, on one level, it is hard for some of us to think of him as other than a big and unique part of the new chapter of KDR, because he was so much a part of our experiences at KDR and at IU. As I've shared with Sarah, after talking with more than a few KDR's brothers about Marty, our memories of him are indeed unique and fond. Again, I shared with Sarah, a common thread of our memories of Marty was that it seemed as if he was woven into the very fabric of the KDR house. He was such an integral part of our experiences that we can't imagine as KDR would have been like if he had not been there. Almost universally, we felt that it seemed as if he had always been there and would always be there. Also, he was one of the nicest guys we've ever privileged to know. Incredibly smart, but one of the nicest guys we were ever privileged to know. We all remember how much fun Marty could be. He had a great dry sense of humor. I know, as I'm sure all of you have, a number of smart people in my life. And there were certainly some very smart, intelligent guys at the KDR house in our town. Steve Hyatt, Steve Freed, come to mind. But Marty was a step above that. Did I really appreciate that Marty was not only intelligent, but that he loved learning. His BA was in classic. He was proficient in languages. And unlike many, he studied not just to earn, but to learn. Marty cherished knowledge and sought to encourage others, including his fraternity brothers, the love of knowledge, but always did so in a non-preachy way. As an academic advisor of the house, he didn't focus on helping others just get good grades. Good grades were important. But he went beyond that to help them learn how to learn. Marty embraced fraternity life. He was the epitome of a brother. Being a part of a brotherhood, caring about and sharing with others, wanting to see them grow, helping in many different ways just because they were brothers. I know of no brother KDR who did not respect Marty and his contributions to the KDR ideal. Marty loved it. He loved the physical beauty of the campus. Despite the fact that I was very young and dumb, he somehow made me and others appreciate the fact that the IU campus was an oasis of beauty and serenity, but at the same time, a vibrant center of learning. He loved the physical beauty, but he also loved the fact that IU is a place of learning, where knowledge is acquired, appreciated, and shared. This was yet another way that he in the experience as KDR at IU. Part of fraternity life and the college experience in general is having fun, and Marty nailed that. He liked to have fun and it was fun to be with. Some of the pictures in the photo booth that Skip put together show that. Many guys mentioned his full-on laugh. If you forget, he liked to laugh. He could laugh with a dry sense of humor. It was dry, but never mean. And he also did enjoy an occasional conviction. Marty was a good man. I can't imagine him being mean or petty. He was caring and generous. He He gave freely of himself and of his talents. He made KDR and even IU a better place. Marty Joachim, you'll be missed.
Hi, I'm Bill Butts. I came to IU and the KDR house in 1961, and Marty was just beginning his reign, his kind, but insistent reign on good scholarship and good study habits. Now I'm going to distill the life of Martin Dewey Joachim into two lists. The list of things that he liked, that pleased him, and a list of things that he did not like, that displeased him. And I think you'll notice the variety in both of these lists. Marty was not a one-note kind of guy. He was interested in all kinds of things. So I think you're going to note the variety, and I think you're also going to note that the list of things he liked is a lot longer than the list of things that he didn't like. Marty was not a down-on-the-mouth kind of guy. He was an optimist on the bright side, and I think you'll see that. So here are some of the things that Marty Joachim particularly liked. Let's begin with Indiana University basketball. And then how about IU libraries, IU opera, the KDR New Chapter brothers throughout his life. Really anything and everything about Indiana University and Bloomington, Marty liked. There was the time, let me tell you a story to start. Marty loved spicy food, hot food. There was the time we ordered pizza somewhere in Europe, I don't remember where it was. And Marty went, those glass cylindrical things that hold the crushed red peppers? Marty took that thing, turned it upside down, and the cap came off on his side of the pizza with, I would say, about a quarter inch of hot peppers. Marty just crushed some of them off and Marty loved Hinkle's hamburgers, always greeted at the cash register by, "Hi, Marty." And he loved the Nashville House restaurant. Its fried chicken, deep fried biscuits with apple butter, and the drive out there, especially in October. Most especially among eateries, Marty loved the pizzeria. From bridge playing days in the KDR house right through to the present, sausage, anchovies, and onions. Maybe pepperoni sometimes, but always anchovies. At home, he treasured the decades-long supper clubs with Bloomington friends, some who are here today. Preparing an elegant meal for his church's silent auction year after year required many days and a great deal of money. He'd like to say, quote, "By the end of the meal, every pot and pan in my kitchen needed washing." But not every kitchen endeavor was a success. After nicking his fingers one afternoon shucking oysters for a dinner party, he swore, "Never again oysters." At home, Marty's collections were legendary. Two-dimensional art from all over, but especially Bloomington and Brown County, the same for pottery. More than 5,000 books, one wall entirely in Greek and Latin. More than 1,000 DVDs. More than 300 music CDs, and more than 400 old vinyls from college days. Every USPS first day stamp cover for 50 years. To help others, he did Meals on Wheels, read manuscripts for Bloomington Theater, interviewed Wells Scholars candidates, and in retirement, as we've heard, worked 2 or 3 days a week at the Lilly Library unpaid. He liked all of these things. Moving beyond IU and Bloomington into the world, Marty loved spaghetti and red sauce. He relished Italian cheeses and the Italian language. He was in awe of Florence. Honoring his Italian-American mother, he loved really nearly everything Italian. He learned the drinking game chug-a-lug. I heard those chuckles. But he was never known to end up under the table, unlike probably several men gathered here this morning. He relished New York Times obituaries and the Sunday crossword puzzle. He wouldn't pass a used bookstore. He relished travel. in the Rockies, the American Southwest, and around the world. He was never known to pass by some unfamiliar town without going in. Once late in life, when discovering where he'd like to go next, he exploded with, "I want to go everywhere." He enjoyed the Smithsonian museums on the Washington Wall, and just as much the Uffizi and Accademia in Florence. Marty was an accomplished photographer, annotating every shot for inclusion in the wonderful photo albums compiled along with detailed travel logs after many trips. Back from a trip, he liked to report that he dumped his suitcase, a very large suitcase, regardless of the length of the trip, directly into his washing machine. That's what he liked to say. And speaking of photos, this loop that Skip Higgins put together is really wonderful. And Tom told where the photos came from, but thank you, Skip, for putting that together. If you haven't had a chance to take a look, stop by and have a look. Marty had no pretenses, once chiding me for talking about, quote, films rather than movies. "Are you trying to be a critic?" he asked. While pledging the fraternity, I one day threw water on active Marty Joachim in the shower. He demanded my pledge book. He returned it 2 days page handwritten essay on why it is not wise to throw water on an active in the shower. Replete. I still have it. It's quite remarkable. Everything else in my pledge book was, give me 20 push-ups and stuff like that. And he wrote a couple of those also. Marty was no prude. Years ago, a Washington professional theater mounted an all-nude production of Macbeth. I kid you not. It really happened. When I told him that the production would be on while he was visiting and would he like to go, he replied, quote, "I've always been interested in Macbeth." And so we went. If you'd like to know more about it, you'll have to come up and ask me. Now, there are 3 things Marty really enjoyed doing. One was making a provocative statement that would start a discussion, better yet an argument, often about politics, then sitting back to observe. The second was learning, lifelong learning. For example, just 5 years ago, he completed a 7-week advanced immersion course in Italian. Pretty old to be doing something like that. His third frequent enjoyment that I recall was to rank things and argue about the rankings. Whether the Blue Mosque or the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul is the most magnificent. Whether Lawrence of Arabia or 2001: A Space Odyssey was the greatest American movie ever made. If you thought it was something different, he would be glad to engage in a discussion. Let me see, what else? Which or Danny Boy? He would argue with you if you thought it was something. In a special place are Sarah and Lisa, Marty's daughters. He loved them from their childhood on. He didn't always understand them, and they didn't always understand him. The relationships among the 3 were complicated. Marty liked a lot of different things, didn't he? But he did not like everything. For example, he hated getting out of bed before 11 in the morning. He did it when he had to, but he didn't like it. He hated the unavoidable drive through Kansas on the way to the Rockies. On the basis of this experience alone, Marty hated Kansas. He hated Kentucky basketball, Ohio State sports, University of Illinois sports, Purdue sports. Actually, just about anything about Purdue, Marty hated. Given the choice of donating to my father's church when he died, or to Purdue, Marty chose Purdue. It then took him several years of emails to get off the solicitation. Marty hated getting those letters and emails. Being from West Lafayette, I loved it. And there's more. He rented and raised swipe of a key wiped out something he was writing on the computer. He despaired of that oddball, ugly addition to the front of Swain Hall. Quote, a carbuncle on the ass of this beautiful campus. That's what he made fun of French efforts to remove and protect their language from the incursion of English. You might as well try to hold back the tide, this language expert remarked in derision. Marty was what Texans used to call a young. Nominate a yellow dog for political office, and Marty, if it was a Democrat. Although, and like some particular Republicans, especially if they were his friends, that uniformly with a passion. When confronted with it, he would draw his shoulders up and shudder, almost in. He had only to hear or read an utterance like, quote, it happened to John and I. Or, quote, me and Jane are going to the lecture. Marty did tolerate split infinitives and ending a sentence with a preposition. But most other corruptions of the proper English grammar we all were taught in school made him apoplectic. He was too polite to correct people, but it hurt. He understood about dialects, but when an educated person misused the cases of pronouns, he was miserable. Maybe it was worse to be a Republican, but not much. So lots of at all. Marty was a kind person, gentle and generous person. I'll end by telling you that when someone died who Marty respected and liked, a friend or someone he only knew through the newspapers, Marty liked to quote Horatio's eulogy to Hamlet. Good night, sweet prince, and flights of angels sing thee to thy rest. So, friend Marty, good night, sweet prince, and flights of angels sing thee. I want to thank you all for coming. We hope many of you, as Tom said, will continue to celebrate Marty's life at our former fraternity house. Thank you for coming. And I think that concludes.
I forgot one thing.
What did I do?
You did, yeah, I did.
Okay.
Parking at Nick's is a problem. They closed Fifth Street with tables in the middle of the street and so on. I'm told that the parking garage in the Poplars that you enter off Sixth Street is free parking on the weekends. So you can park there and then walk block to Nick's if you want. For those with handicaps, you go through the alley behind Nick's and knock on the exit door or call Nick's. The phone number is 332-4040. That's something a good KDR will never forget. And they will, people inside Nick's will open the fire escape door so you can enter through the alley. And that'll get you in Nick's.